One of the most fascinating parts about Trigun Stampede is how it portrays Vash and Knives' opposing worldviews. In Stampede, there are compelling defenses for both sides of the argument. Who is right and who is wrong becomes blurred as the series unfolds. Knives wants to kill humans to save the plants because humans are exploiting them until they die, while Vash argues that humans are only exploiting plants because Knives stranded them on a desert planet in his failed attempt to exterminate them and they have no choice if they want to survive. But then there's also the argument that the humans were exploiting plants long before they were stranded on Gunsmoke, in the same way they exploited the planet Earth and experimented on Tesla. And it's Vash who's glossing over these deeds in favor of wanting to fit in. Or the argument that Knives has the same goal as Rem, who Vash so reveres. He wants to build a paradise, just one for plants, not for humans. And only one of these paradises is acceptable to Vash. So the way Stampede goes, humans aren't living in paradise because Knives refused to sacrifice his species. And the only reason plants aren't living in paradise is due to Rem's interference for the same reason. By saving humans, Rem altered the course of history so that both humans and plants would suffer equally on Gunsmoke. If humans can't have paradise, then plants can't either. And while Vash insists that there must be a way that they can all live together peacefully, he does nothing to save the plants except give them extra energy to prolong their suffering at human hands. So as you can see, the situation is messy. Who's to blame and who's in the right? It's all subjective. In Knives' point of view, it's Rem's fault for betraying plants and saving the humans. In Vash's point of view, it's Knives' fault for betraying humans and causing the fall. Both of them are acting in the name of selfless goals while holding selfish motivations, protecting plants and protecting Rem's legacy because deep down they are both afraid, as they try to find their own ways to fit into this world where they are the only two of their own species. What I love about Trigun Stampede is that we get cool visual metaphors to complicate the nuance. In the very first episode, we get this image of a dying red plant next to a healthy blue plant. Vash is symbolized by the color red and Knives by the color blue. Going by this metaphor, Vash himself, being a plant, is sick. In Knives' point of view, Vash is unwell because of Rem. Like Rem, Vash is sacrificing himself for humanity. And like how Rem protected the twins because she felt guilty for the experiments on Tesla and wanted to atone, Vash is protecting humanity because he feels guilty about the fall and wants to fix the damage that he's caused. If this continues, Vash will burn out and die like all the other plants before him. That's why Knives needs to save him, because Vash is sick. That's why Knives needs to unmake him, because Vash is so unwell that he will destroy himself if he doesn't intervene. And it's all humanity's fault. If they didn't exist, Vash would be a nice healthy blue plant like him. Now what's interesting is that in a way this is true. We see how Vash is covered in scars. We see how Vash sacrifices his body for humans who are constantly trying to kill him. But it's also true that Knives is as much the cause of this as Rem is. And more than that, on Gunsmoke, a dying plant is the status quo. It isn't unusual for plants to turn red and die. Rather, it's an inescapable fate. What is unusual is Knives living for as long as he has and remaining a healthy blue plant. To avoid the inescapable fate of all plants, he has adopted extreme measures.
Knives won't let humans touch him. He won't let humans near him. Humans won't have the slightest chance of
capturing him and using him because before they can, Knives will kill them.
Why else would he wear his gate like a safety blanket at all times except in front of Vash? Our villain Knives is equally unwell but in the opposite extreme. He can never let down his guard so long as humans exist. He can never live in peace so long as he shares a planet with humans.
Knives is so afraid of humanity that the only way he could ever feel safe is to eliminate them completely. So there becomes a problem. The solutions that Knives and Vash have come up with to manage their trauma directly conflict with each other. The more Vash lets himself get hurt, the more Knives confirms that humans should die. The more Knives kills humans, the more Vash feels guilty and tries to atone by getting himself hurt.
It's a vicious cycle that feeds into each other and exacerbates the issue. It's perhaps beneficial to view them as the same individual, at least as far as they're concerned. So in a sense, Vash could feel guilty about the fall, not necessarily because he thinks he's caused it, but because Knives Knives is the only other person like Vash in existence. He's the only other member of his species, in the same way that when Vash gets hurt, Knives takes that personally. They are both representative of their species, and if Knives isn't allowed to live, then Vash isn't allowed to live. I think this all comes down to trying to find a place where they belong and to justify their existence.
But how did the twins come to have such opposing worldviews? In my opinion, this comes down to nature being influenced by nurture. The major difference between Vash and Knives is that Vash was born as a plant that doesn't generate anything. Because of this, Vash grew up believing that he's a useless waste of space. In fact, Vash is about as useful as the red geranium that Rem keeps locked inside a glass tank. Its only value is that it makes Rem happy. It's pretty to look at, but entirely reliant on Rem for its continued existence. This mindset allows Vash to be content with being treated like dirt. Like, did anyone else find the episode where Vash is earning the trust of Ship 3 to be rather messed up? It's easy to think it was a good thing when Vash looked so happy to be treated with basic human rights. But it's interesting to note that if Knives were in that position, he never would have been let out of his cell. In fact, if Knives were in that position, they would have used him to generate resources, because after the crash, they were short on plants. The only reason they couldn't do that with Vash was because Vash doesn't produce anything. And if Vash could generate resources, he would happily use up his entire life force in order to justify his existence. Vash, I love you, but you need therapy.
Unlike Vash, Knives isn't grateful for being treated like dirt. He doesn't see himself as a waste of space, but as superior, which is also a problem. Knives is unwilling to make compromises because he has the power to enforce his will. He was born capable of generating resource, so unlike Vash, there is a very real risk of Knives being used against his will as a power source, or worse, being perceived as a threat and eliminated unless he stands up for himself. We see this in the way Rem treats each of the twins due to their natures. She encourages Vash when he's down about having no powers, because it's a good thing if Vash can be human passing, because that means Rem can protect him. But on the other hand, we see that Rem is constantly discouraging Knives from using his powers. We hear her remind him that he isn't allowed to use his powers, that he must pretend to eat and drink. For Knives to be safe with humans, he has to actively suppress a huge part of who he is.
Ultimately, I think the true blame in Trigun is trauma. Both Vash and Knives are deeply traumatized characters who responded in equally extreme but opposite ways. For Knives, the experiments on Tesla made him so afraid that the only way to ensure his and Vash's safety was to eliminate humans. For Vash, the fall made him so guilty that he thinks he doesn't deserve to live and will sacrifice every part of himself in order to protect Rem's legacy. In response to this past trauma, Knives decides to destroy the world, while Vash decides to destroy himself. Love and peace.